Welcome into Training Camp Live, presented by Publix. Casey Phillips and Scott Smith here. Another beautiful morning for some football. We got the guys out there. It's a great look, great shot. Thanks to everybody in our production team that has been helping with this show already for a little bit over a week. We're about halfway through all of these shows, and we're trying to give you as many shots as possible of practice. We're also taking all of your questions, so Facebook, YouTube, if you want to get a question in for us. We tend to do that in the last segment. I might sprinkle one or two through here just in case they have to do with what we're talking about. But go ahead and get those questions in now. Again, YouTube or Facebook, that's how we'll find them. For now, we did have a little bit of roster news that came out this morning.
Yeah, there's actually been fewer roster moves than you would normally have in a camp, I think, because it was so compressed, and also you have 80 instead of 90 on the roster, which we can talk about a little bit. But we brought back wide receiver Spencer Schnell, Illinois State product. Not a real big guy, but shifty. He was a punt returner too, so that could potentially help with some reps there. And part of that competition, because you've lost TJ Logan and John Franklin from that rotation. He's a guy that was an undrafted free agent with us last year, went to camp with us last year, and actually got brought back at the end of the year, and when we had all those hamstring injuries for the receivers. And he did get into one game and returned a couple punts. So it's a guy that kind of knows what's going on here, and I think that's what you value when you're trying to add somebody quickly, because you're down a little bit. Like I said, John Franklin, that's one receiver who's out. Tyler Johnson was not practicing again yesterday. We haven't had a chance to see yet if he's out there today, but chances are he's not. So you definitely needed somebody to take some more reps.
Right, that's right. And you did mention the whole 80 versus 90 on the roster. Tell us a little bit about just why that's the case this year, and how you feel like that potentially has affected camp and how it affects cuts as well.
Well, the move from 90 down to 80 was part of the agreement between the NFL and the NFLPA, the revised CBA, I guess you'd call it, that allowed them to figure out a way to do training camps and hopefully do the regular season amid the pandemic. And it was just, I believe it was a compromise on just safety. Slightly smaller numbers means it makes it easier to social distance. As we've said, the entire bottom level of One Buck Place over there, the Advent Health Training Center, has had to be sort of reworked just so guys could have larger meeting rooms and more meeting rooms, so when they're sitting in there, they can be spaced out. So 80 instead of 90 does that. But as I think you were saying to me before we even went on the air, it's kind of a big difference when it's going to come to final cuts.
Right. Right? Yeah, we were talking about this a little bit yesterday during practice in general, that as we looked at some of the guys, we're talking about who we think could make the roster, who would make this, and we started realizing how few cuts compared to years past. That in the year past, you go from 90 to 53, and it just felt so dramatic. And yes, you had some guys on the practice squad, but now, when you're already at 80 to begin with, and the practice squad is bigger, there aren't going to be that many guys that are cut.
Yeah, just do the math. You were going from 90 to 53, then 10 practice squads, so you're going from 90 to 63. Generally, you brought in a couple guys from outside, so you might lose a couple more. But if you just take 63 of your 90, that's still 27 guys that are no longer here. This year, going from 80 to 53, plus 16 practice squads, that's 69. If you don't bring anybody else in, that means of the 80 guys out here, only 11 of them will not be here after all those cuts, and that's kind of amazing. And we've talked about how this is a tough year for rookies and newcomers to prove what they can do, but on the flip side of that coin, there's a greater chance of being able to stick around and get some more time to prove what you can do.
Yeah, I wonder which of those is going to win out, essentially, in that idea of it was going to be harder for them to prove themselves, but there were going to be less people cut. So I wonder, if that's how much that will affect the numbers in the end of the day of undrafted guys that get signed compared to years past.
I think there'll be more of them around.
Yeah,
because you're still gonna value continuity, and even though those guys haven't got as much time as they should, they still have been working here in camp for three or 4 weeks before you get to the regular season, so they would know more about what's going on with your playbook than some of you bringing off the street.
Right, that's very true. And we always love showing you guys our Frontier play of the day from practice yesterday, so let's go ahead and take a look at that.
Can it be defense this time? That one was almost more impressive when you were standing here watching in a wide view.
It was, yeah.
I remember him catching that pass one-handed and thinking, man, that was an amazing catch, and it looked almost routine there.
It did, but yeah, from where we were standing, you could tell he had to really reach for that and over the shoulder, and it was a very sort of nimble play, and it honestly, it showed the catch radius of Cam Brate. That's pretty incredible.
And it was something you really like to see, because on that play, he had gotten pretty wide open. There wasn't anybody around him, and obviously that throw was a little bit high, but he's able to go up and get it, which is great.
Some other news that we found out yesterday, Coach has talked about how he was going to have a couple scrimmages at the stadium to try to mimic as much of a game-like experience as we can without preseason games and that sort of thing. And we got a little bit of news about when the first one of those is going to be.
Yeah, it's going to be on Friday. And probably, if I were a betting man, I think the second one will be the following Friday, which would be pretty much the end of camp because that's the last day of the third week. And then the following week is when you actually are preparing for the New Orleans game. So, yeah, it's going to be there on Friday. They're going to, as we said before, they're going to like turn on the lights and the replay system and the scoreboards and so on. And they're just going to try to make sure that everything can run smoothly because you don't have preseason games to practice any of that. But there won't be fans in the stands, and I have a feeling that the information flow from there, they're going to want to restrict even more than usual because I think they're going to be running actual plays that they might be using in week one. So not going to want to really give a lot of that away.
Yes.
What I'm curious about is how Bruce is going to split up the team. You know, is he going to make it first team versus third team? I mean, is he going to try to make it more fair and split it up a little bit? That'll be interesting.
It's interesting because, I mean, that's sort of the question that happens a lot in preseason games, that you do tend to have first team versus first team for a bit, but depending on when certain teams sub people, you can end up with some pretty mismatched things. So, I mean, it'll be interesting to see. I can see where it would be a little bit of both of you want to build some confidence maybe, but then you also do want to push them a little bit. Maybe the first one you do a little bit more first versus second or third team, and then the second game you get a little bit more intense competition.
Well, yeah, if you're actually trying to use that as preparation for the New Orleans game, you'd probably want to keep your entire first team offense together, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does seem like that. Yeah, that's a great point. Okay, well, I know that someone that we cannot talk about enough on here and just never gets enough respect, in our opinion, in the outside world, Lavonte David. So, you know, how do you feel like you've seen him in camp? But people are always talking about, like, man, he's actually been in the league quite a while. But the dude just doesn't seem to age, doesn't seem to lose a step. He just seems to get better and better every year.
I think we're hoping if we keep saying it enough that he's underrated, that he doesn't get the attention, that he doesn't get the respect, that suddenly it will happen, right?
Yes, that's our goal, is that we are his, like, stump speech for him. We are
look
the people.
At this.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Those are from NFL Next Gen stats. That's how you get something like coverage grade, which is a little more subjective than just solo tackles. But that tackle for loss thing there, I mean, the fact that he was third, that's probably one of the lowest finishes he's had in that category in his career, because other than J.J. Watt, he's got more tackles for loss than anybody since he came in the league in 2012, and that's not because of a ton of sacks. Most sacks also count as tackles for losses, so a guy that racks up a lot of sacks is getting a lot of TFLs. Lavonte is just getting them all over the place. But as to your question about how they are, and then these are his ranks in team history, and obviously the guy in first definitely in interceptions is Derrick Brooks on that one. Derrick Brooks also leads in tackles, so that's the guy he's chasing on all those lists there. Lavonte, coach just did say, it was either yesterday or the day before, that Lavonte David looks like he's just like he did 5, 6, 7 years ago, that he has not slowed down at all, which is awesome, because he could probably slow down a little bit and still be extremely effective just because of what he knows and his experience, but he hasn't slowed down. So the excitement of those two guys, him and Devin White, who is very, very fast going into the season, is very high, I can tell you that. I think the bigger question is what's behind them, and I think we're going to talk about that a little bit more in the next segment.
Yeah, he and Lavonte and Tom Brady, I feel like, must be on the same, I don't know, nutrition plans, something, I don't know, whatever it is they're doing. Good
genes.
Anti-aging companies should be hiring both of them to figure out what it is that they have been doing. Another guy that has had some incredible sacks, and you mentioned sacks and tackles for loss, is Shaq Barrett, and a guy that came, I don't know that I want to say out of nowhere, but definitely exceeded expectations last year. What do you feel like the expectations will be for him this year? Can he, repeat now that teams are going to know from day one to be focusing a lot on him?
Yeah, I was doing a thing the other day when I was trying to compare players this year to guys what they did last year, like who could be this year's, say, Vita Vea, the guy who quietly has a real good year that most people don't really notice until it's over, things like that. There was no comparison for Shaq Barrett. That simply doesn't happen. I mean, he had 14 sacks over four or five seasons in Denver, and then had 19.5 to lead the NFL and shatter Warren Sapp's franchise record, which I thought could possibly last forever. That's not going to happen ever again for the Buccaneers, and probably hardly ever around the NFL. It's a once in a franchise type of situation. And I'm not tooting my own horn here, but I don't know if you remember, I specifically said I loved that signing at the time, because I love in free agency when you get a guy who's still in his prime, who has had some success in a limited role in another team, and you're going to give him a bigger role and see if he can make much more out of that. And I compared it to Hardy Nickerson way back when, who was playing for Pittsburgh, but we made him the center of our defense, and he suddenly blossomed into a multiple-time Pro Bowler. Same thing with Shaq. It was the perfect situation for an unrestricted free agent signing, and boy, did it work out.
Yeah, that's a great point. All right, well, don't forget to be submitting your questions on YouTube or Facebook. We'll get to those later in the show. Next segment, we're going to be talking about some of the depth at the inside and outside linebacker positions, so it's a perfect time to meet our rookie, Chapelle Russell.
I first started playing football in 8th grade regulation. Besides that, I was playing on backyard football. But when I finally did have the chance to play, my first position was wide receiver, defensive end, linebacker, running back, a little bit of everything. Growing up real young, through grade school, it wasn't really too much to complain about. It was just the location of where I was at. I was just bouncing around a lot. Like being young, you don't really focus on that being that young. You just I'm in a new area. I finally settled down in New Jersey. And that's when things got hard. Actually, when I finally did settle down, it's crazy because that's when I actually started running into a lot of adversity. As far as living situations, transportation, everything. I was going through a whole lot. Once I finally thought, man, we're here, we settled. I was with my mom, my brother, and it's we just started getting hit with sledgehammers. It was crazy. It was crazy. In high school, we got evicted out of our house. We had no home, jumping from motel to motel to motel. I had to move in with my high school football coach's parents. Rest in peace to the lady. Her name was Barbara Clark. She was basically like another grandmother to me. She just passed away a week ago, 2 weeks ago, to coronavirus. So that weighed on me as well, because she took me in when I didn't have anything at all. So like I said, football brought me to that family as well. Without football, I might have not even been able to live with them. Football was just a way for me to settle down. When a lot was going on at home, football was a way for me to get out there, let the emotions out, and just have fun with my guys. Football was also a way for me to go to college. Without football, I don't know if I would have been in college. I might have been in the military right now. My mom's in the military, so football just brought happiness within my family. Seeing my mom at the games, that was great. I never really got the opportunity too much to even have my mom at games. I see myself contributing by just playing my role. I'm going to come in and do what I have to do to the fullest. Personally, I feel like that would be special teams. So special teams, I'm going to give Lavonte David, Devin White, Mitt, Jack. I'm going to give all these guys everything, all I have, so they don't have to play special teams. They can go out and play defense. And when my number is called and when it's ready for me to play defense, I guarantee I will come in. They won't have nothing to worry about. My biggest goal as a Buck, my individual goal was just to make the team. I just want to make the team, come in and contribute, of course. My team goal was just, we got all the hype. We got TV. We got TV now. We got Bronx. Everybody looking at us now. We got the defense. So obviously the team goal will be to win everything. Why can't it be us? Why can't we go win everything?
There's a lot of things that are different. I think when it comes to football, a lot of those things are the same. Trust and communication, and it's about all being on the same page so people can anticipate and play with confidence. We got a long journey ahead on those things.
Go! It's gonna make him get it. We got all that. When we come out, we gotta be a little under control. Guys, we're gonna catch these on the numbers. We're not a moving target on this. Gotta get at least 4. I ain't throwing it ever. Nice. Go! Turn! There it is. Okay. Smooth. Yes, sir.
Welcome back into Training Camp Live, presented by Publix. Casey Phillips and Scott Smith here. And last segment, we were talking a little bit about Lavonte and Shaq. And believe me, at those couple positions, we know who our starters are. That is not up for debate. But after that, there's a whole lot of kerfuffling happening there. People, that's my favorite word. I try to. Wow. I'm deciding that I'm going to try to use that more. Back in there of guys trying to fight for those different positions. So why don't we start at inside linebacker and go through some of who those guys are behind Devin White and behind Lavonte David.
I'll definitely do that, but real quick, and we got a graphic for it here. Real quick, in that last shot before it came to us, you could see Vita Vea back there, and he still has that club on his hand, but Coach says that's coming off soon, and he thinks things are going to get a lot better for Vita on the practice field once that happens.
Good.
So what you see here, obviously Lavonte David and Devin White are your starters, and Coach said yesterday that Kevin Minter is very clearly the number 3 guy, and he did step in when Devin White was out for about a month last year and did very well, kept everything pretty much together. So beyond that, then you have 3 guys basically fighting for what could be either 1 or 2 spots, depending on how they arrange their depth at inside and outside linebacker. Obviously Chapelle Russell, he's looked good out here. Coach has said he looks like he could be a guy that can make an impact right away on special teams, which is also what Noah Dawkins did. And then I think a guy that we all are rooting for is Jack Sitchie, just because he clearly is a talented guy, talented enough to make the roster each of the last 2 years, but just keeps running into injury misfortune, and hopefully this is the year when that doesn't happen. Yeah,
I mean, maybe a guy like that, it's almost beneficial to have not had as many reps this offseason, can be even fresher. And I mean, I'm trying to find anything here for him, because it really is it's just been so sad what's happened for him.
I don't even want to call him injury prone. Last year the thing was an elbow injury, and that was just a total freak thing.
That's not something where you are injury prone. That's
he was doing a special teams play. I think he might have been making a tackle. At least he was in the scrum, and he just, as he fell, he landed on his hand and kind of messed the elbow. We've seen it before, but that's not injury prone. That's just a bad piece of luck.
And speaking of him making a special teams play, Coach has talked about how he mentioned this specifically, I think it was yesterday in his media, if you are not a starter at some of these positions, you better be able to be a special teams contributor, and that's going to be the thing that earns you that spot. And he mentioned linebacker, cornerback, some of those areas. So of the different guys in inside linebacker, what do you feel like is going to be the defining factor for some of them? Are there guys that you already know that maybe they can have a bigger contribution there? If you were going to try to place money on who those guys are going to be behind Devin and Lavonte, who might it be?
Well, we already know that all 4 of those guys can play special teams. I mean, I guess we don't know that about Chapelle Russell yet, but Coach has been saying it looks like he can. Kevin Minter, even when he was a real core guy, he might have been our leader in special team snaps last year. I'd have to look that up, but if not, he was close. Even when he started playing on the defense, playing every snap on defense when Devin White was out, he refused to give up his role on special teams. Usually when a guy gets elevated starting lineup, they reduce what they're doing on special teams because they just don't want to overwork the guy. But he refused to do that, and I asked him about that after one game. He's like, that's my job. I know that's my job, my main job here, and when Devin White comes back, that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm like, I don't want to give it up in the interim. I want to keep doing it. So we know he can. Noah Dawkins came in and stepped right in on special teams. Before he's hurt, Jack Sitchie was always playing, so I don't think that's an issue with any of those guys. But one guy that's a perfect example of what you were just talking about is not a linebacker, but a cornerback. It's really the camp sensation so far among the younger players is undrafted guy Parnell Motley, the corner out of Oklahoma. Just keeps making play after play. He had at least 2 interceptions yesterday, including one on the last play of the practice. And he's had a ton of interceptions, and that's what they've been talking about. If you get your hands on the ball, hold on to it. And Coach says he definitely does that. But somebody asked him, but then Coach said, but he's got to carve out a role in special teams. And somebody asked him, well, if he was that good as a defender, could he make it just for that, even if he's not playing special teams? He's like, if you're the best reserve cornerback, but you don't play special teams, you're going to lose that spot to the third corner who does play special teams. So that's how important it is.
Yeah, and I think that sometimes that gets overlooked, that there's a lot of assumption that it's just based on for corner specifically, who's been making plays in practice, and your first, second, third, and fourth best corners make it, and that's it. But it's not necessarily the case. Yeah, you have to be able to do more things, especially if you're not going to be on the field very often as a corner. If you're not a starter, yeah, you've got to be able to contribute other stuff, because it's so hard to remember. Not even is it just that there are 53 roster spots, but they're not all active on game day.
That's it.
To be active on game day, they don't want you just standing off to the side.
That's it,
you
right
know,
there.
that like you've got to be contributing there, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, so Parnell Motley could make the 53-man roster because you don't want to let good corner talent get away. But then he might not be active on game day if he's not playing on special teams.
Right, that's a good point. Okay, well, let's look at the outside linebacker spot. We talked about the inside linebackers. Let's kind of do the same thing where we go through these guys where, hey, Shaq, JPP, we know, starters, they're pretty amazing at football. So, guys after that, where do we feel like we stand, and who are some of these guys and some of these names that Bucs fans might not be as familiar with yet?
Yeah, so there's one more than there are of the inside linebackers to sort through, but they might keep one or two more of them. Obviously, it's the exact same situation at inside linebacker. You obviously are starting Shaq and JPP. It's a little bit different, though, in that your two inside linebackers, if everything goes right, are playing every single snap. Lavonte and Devin aren't coming off the field, whereas as a pass rusher, you want to have some sort of rotation. Now, Shaq and JPP are two guys that like to get, especially JPP, as many snaps as they can get. A couple years ago with the Giants, JPP led all defensive linemen in snaps. So they want to be on the field, but they're not going to be on the field for 100% of the snaps. Your third guy is going to play a decent amount, and it's been made clear on several occasions, including yesterday from Coach Arians, I think, that Anthony Nelson is clearly the third guy there. And then the other four you saw battling it out there are battling it out. You got, if we could see that graphic again, you got Cousin Daniels, undrafted guy with us last year. Quentin Bell, I think he was a 7th-round pick of the Raiders, and then we picked him up. But so that's similar. Michael Divinity, an undrafted linebacker, an undrafted guy, and Cam Gill, two undrafted guys. Most of those are small school guys, other than Michael Divinity, obviously, from LSU.
Yes, Cam Gill definitely is a small school guy. I had never heard of his school before.
Is that the Prairie View?
I don't even remember now. That's the beauty, is that I had never heard of it, and I still feel like I haven't. But Cam Gill has looked great in practice, and I walked over and watched the O-line and, pass rush one-on-ones, which we always love watching. That's always entertaining.
We're not getting to see as much of it this
year. Boy, Cam beat his guy.
Really?
Yeah, it was incredible. It got the day I watched. I think this was probably 3 days ago or so now. Again, time has no meaning in training camp and COVID times, so I have no idea. But a few days ago, I went over and it got, when I was watching, the largest reaction.
Is that right?
Because guys get all fired up when if their guy, if an O-lineman pancakes someone, they get all excited if they beat a guy. So it got a loud reaction, and I was impressed.
Well, I'll take your Cam Gill and raise you one Michael Divinity, because I was impressed by a snap of his a couple days ago where it was a full team drill and he was coming off the right edge, which is the quarterback's blind side. And I don't know exactly how it happened, but he got free quickly. They have to pull up, obviously. And in fact, this ended up being a running play, and he just basically tagged the running back right after he got the handoff. So there's some talent there. There's a lot of speed. Most of those guys have that one thing. They have that raw speed. That's definitely true of Cousin Daniels and Quentin Bell. Quentin Bell is the Prairie View A&M guy.
That's right.
He used to be a wide receiver.
I didn't think it was like. I think Cam Gill's like Wagner State.
That sounds right. Wagner
something.
Or Weber State, or
one of those.
Wagner. I think it's
like
Wagner
that.
College, and then so they're all from smaller schools other than Michael.
Which I love our scouting department's ability to find that and find guys that are from small schools, unconventional ways to find people. It's
look
great.
at our 3 starters on the interior offensive line.
That's
you
a
got
good point.
Ali Marpet from Hobart. You got Alex Kappa from a small school in California.
Another D3.
And Ryan Jensen is Colorado State Pueblo.
Pueblo, yeah, that's incredible. I love that. Okay, well, we still have one more segment coming up where we're going to get to your questions. So if you haven't already done so, make sure you submit those over on Facebook and YouTube, and we'll be right back.
I am by far the best dancer.
Woo!
I love Camp Cam, and I enjoyed that one because Gronk just was like, no, I'm sorry. There are no other options. I'm the best dancer. And the thing is, when he's been on things like Masked Singer and all that, it's like he's got some evidence to back him up there.
Yeah, well,
you know?
If you're a good athlete, you definitely should have the skills to be a good dancer.
It kind of makes me sad that his touchdown celebration is a spike, because if you're that good of a dancer, I feel like we got to add a little flair in there.
Yeah, but it feels right for a guy who goes
I know,
like
Gronk spike.
Gronk
it's
smash.
fair. Although it is going to be fun to watch now with him and Cam on the same team, because we've always talked about that, of comparing Cam's spike to Gronk's spike, and
who can bury the ball 2 feet?
Yeah,
deep in the end
who
zone.
can cause the biggest divot in our field whenever they try this.
For the record, Cam Gill is from Wagner.
Yes.
As you said, and Cap is from Humboldt State.
Yes, the other H. It's so incredible.
You knew it was an H.
That was all I knew, and then I couldn't remember the rest of it. Okay, our first question. Again, if you have a question for us, make sure you submit it on YouTube or Facebook, and I'll be able to find it there. We had a question from Daniel asking, has anyone been standing out on special teams, since that seems to be such a big part of the depth idea?
Well, I guess you could say that Coach has mentioned Chapelle Russell a couple times, so that's of the newcomers. I don't think you really have to question if Ryan Smith is going to be good at it, if Kevin Minter is going to be good at it. I guess, that probably go with Chapelle Russell. It's a little hard to tell. I know they're saying they're doing more live stuff, but it just looks like the same drills over and over again. And and that's what Coach has kind of bemoaned that a little bit. He said that's one of the main reasons he misses the preseason games, is to see them live in special teams, because as we were just talking about, that can be the difference about who you keep and who you keep active. And you really don't want to find out on an actual game day in the regular season that this guy maybe wasn't a great special teamer like you thought he was. So it's a little hard to tell, to be honest with you.
Darren asked, what do you think about adding Earl Thomas now that he's available?
I don't see the need. I mean, I think we've got enough safety depth right now. I mean, I think it's quite a battle between Jordan Whitehead and Mike Edwards and Antoine Winfield. And then you still have Andrew Adams, who's proven to be a solid starter there, and Dakota Dixon, who looked good last summer. So I think you got plenty of depth there, and all you're going to do by bringing in that guy is just take reps away from these young guys that you like. There's always a veteran or two that comes available that people want to ask about, and I can understand Earl Thomas is probably a Hall of Famer in the long run, but he's pretty far along in his career now, and he just got released. I know it's because of conduct detrimental to the team, but there was reports that it had to do with the fact that there were a lot of players that thought that maybe he shouldn't be starting there anymore. So I think he has to go to the right place. Obviously, Earl Thomas has been a great player, probably can still help a team, but I think there's probably a team he'd be a better fit on.
Okay, and Eric asked, how is Ryan Jensen's camp going? Are he and Tom working well together?
I think so. If Ryan's willing to do everything that Tom wants him to do to keep the ball dry, I think Ryan is doing everything he can to make that a good relationship. And he said they talked right after they signed, and it took a while to get around to that issue about how Tom wants the centers to keep the ball dry and what they have to do with the towel and the talcum powder and everything. So I think they forged a good relationship right away. And Ryan was talking about how somebody said they thought he was the leader on that line last year, and he said, as a center, it's almost part of the job description to be the leader of the line. And when you're talking about Tom Brady obviously being a leader in the huddle, and then Ryan Jensen being a leader on the line, you're probably going to have a pretty good relationship between those two guys. I think you need to, obviously.
Okay. I saw that another Daniel, again, I think this is like the fourth different Daniel.
We're awash in Daniels.
We are, yeah. We have so many. Had complimented us and said that what a great job we were doing. So thank you.
Oh,
I appreciate
thanks,
that, Daniel. Always
Appreciate
enjoy a shout out. And again, a different Daniel. This is so great. Asked, unless there's just the same Daniel making a bunch of different Facebook profiles with different last names and different photos, which I doubt is happening.
But definitely wants us to know that it's Daniel.
That it is Daniel. Said, how does this year's team's personality, things like swag and identity, compare to other years that you have observed in training camp?
Listen, I don't want this to sound like a cop-out, but you have to understand that this has not been a normal year for us. We're never around the players any more than right now. If they were on field 3 right now, that would be the closest we get to them, because they're in a different tier, and we're restricting contact. Only a small amount of the staff can get even close to them, and we all know the reason why, and it's a good thing. And the numbers have been going very well for the NFL. So far, the way they're doing it has worked. So I'm not trying, like I said, I'm not trying to cop out, but you can probably tell as much as we can just from looking at camp cams how much fun they're having, how
Yep.
loose they are. In terms of swagger, though, I mean, I don't really count swagger off what I see in a practice because everybody's pretty intense about that as it is.
Right.
Swagger is something you see like off the field and coming off the field and in the locker room and so on.
And
it's
game
just-
day as well. I
and
think that, against the other team, because I don't know that you're going to.
There you go.
Like when they're trash talking out here, it's a little bit more in jest
Yeah.
and in fun than legitimate.
Most of the time.
Most of the time. That's a fair point. But yeah, I think it is definitely going to be the true test of that when a game comes.
Yeah.
And how that does. But I will say that from the interviews we've done, from the little we can be sort of as close to them as we can, it does feel like there is a confidence.
There's definitely confidence.
I don't know about true, in terms of swagger, identity, all that kind of stuff, and necessarily in years past. But yeah, I do truly believe.
The young defensive backs are very confident, by
Yes.
the way. If somebody asked Antoine Winfield about comparisons that have been made of him to Budda Baker and Tyrann Mathieu, which are very complimentary comparisons, and he didn't shy. Some guys will shy away from that. Like, I haven't done anything yet.
Right.
I'm going to be my own Antoine Winfield. He's like, yeah, I think that's accurate. And then Carlton Davis was asked about coach saying he's a top 10 cornerback. He said, yeah, that's facts.
Yes. Yeah.
So they're confident. Don't worry about that.
Right. We had a few different questions about if there will be any live coverage or ability for fans to watch the scrimmage on Friday, knowing that it might be a little bit more of a game-like scenario.
Yeah, and for that reason, I think there's going to be even less than what we're getting out of these. As I said earlier in the show, I think you're going to see even more restricted information flow from that because I think they're going to be doing stuff that is actual preparation for the Saints game, and there's just no reason to let that out. And every team across the league is doing this. Every team.
Right. And I like this question. Mike asked, what kind of defenses are we expecting to see with Brady? Are teams going to play more zone against us due to all the weapons?
I would think that depends on the personnel of the other team. I mean, and the personality of their defensive coordinators. Some defensive coordinators, like to be a little more bend and break and play more zone and keep the action in front of you. And some defensive coordinators like to play a lot of man so they can do more with various blitzes and things up front. But you got to have the personnel to do that. And if we want to talk about the Saints, the first game, I think they have the personnel to be very aggressive. They've got good corners. Obviously, Marshawn Lattimore's fantastic. They've got good safeties, and they have a defensive front that puts a lot of pressure on opposing teams, especially led by Cameron Jordan. So just from the beginning of the season, I think you'd probably see a pretty aggressive team, but it's going to change from week to week.
Okay, and we had a question, which position group has looked the best in camp so far?
We've got good questions today.
I know, we have.
Guys are
That
doing
one
a
was from
great job,
Connor
guys
over on
and gals.
YouTube.
Which position group has looked the best? Well, you can't tell very much in the trenches, so I'm going to eliminate the O-line and the D-line. The running backs had a rough day on Monday, so let's eliminate them. I mean, the quarterbacks are always going to – I mean, when you got Tom Brady, and Blaine Gabbers look good, so it could be quarterbacks. But I think I'd probably go with wide receivers.
Okay.
I can't think of a lot of bad plays by those guys. And you see Scotty Miller showing up a lot. You see Justin Watson taking a big step forward. Yeah, I'd probably go with them.
Okay. All right. Well, that's going to do it for us on this edition of Training Camp Live presented by Publix. Thanks, as always, for tuning in. We hope you guys enjoyed some of the shots of practice and getting to ask some questions. We will be back here tomorrow morning, same time, same place. Again, YouTube and Facebook if you want to submit those questions. Here's our Training Camp Live schedule. We'll see you then.